Yeah, Spencer, how are you?
What's going on, guys? Good to be here.
So Spencer,
How you doing?
Good to see you
Long
again,
time
man.
no see,
I know, buddy.
Yeah.
Long time no see, Bull.
I know, it's been a while. How's it going?
Can't complain. Enjoying it. Podcast is doing pretty well, I think.
Yeah.
I know. Trevor Lawrence is a big topic today, which ironically it times out well because I talked about it this morning on the podcast.
look at
so.
that.
Did look at that.
Look
All
at
right,
that.
We'll add you.
It all lines up, right?
So Spencer, we'll jump in this conference. You mentioned Trevor Lawrence
Yeah.
because there was a report. I don't know who it was from. Somebody. I don't
I think his name was Ryan Burr. His name was.
Yeah, I don't know who the hell he is. I think he was the 14th president. Oh, that's Aaron Burr. I don't think he was the 14th.
No, he's the one who got into a duel with Hamilton. That's who.
Yeah, was Aaron Burr even president? Wasn't there a Burr that was president?
He wasn't president. That's why he got into the duel with.
All right.
Yeah.
What was that, Mike?
Spencer's right, and the guy's name's Ryan Burr.
Yeah, Ryan Burr. Anyway.
Bill Burr?
So Ryan Burr, whoever the hell he is, was saying that the Steelers apparently called the Jaguars and were interested in Trevor Lawrence. So Spencer, let's start with you. What do you? I don't know that the Browns could even afford it with the cap. I don't even know how realistic. If you're the Browns, would you call the Jaguars?
I think the cap thing is interesting because everyone always says that, but there's always ways to manipulate it, right? Like there's always ways to make it work.
There usually are, but if you have to trade Myles Garrett,
that's true.
I don't know how much more they can manipulate at this point.
Yeah, no, that's fair. But
but let's assume there is a way.
Yeah,
So,
if there's a way. I think the most important thing here is like, what's it going to cost you? I think Ryan reported the Steelers were offering their first this year and their second this year. Is that enough? I don't know. I don't know like what the conversation was like from that point on.
Yeah.
My biggest thing for the Browns is like if they're asking for 2 firsts and they're like, hey, we want your first this year and your first next year. I don't know if I want to do that. Partially, I think there's just PTSD from you traded 3 firsts for Deshaun, and that obviously hasn't gone well. You're going to give up now 5 years worth of first-round picks for Deshaun and Trevor Lawrence. Now, the other alternative could be like maybe you just trade the second pick now, and you get like a bunch of picks, and you can maybe get another second next year, and then you could be like, okay, we'll trade you this year and next year, and you still have another one next year. So that's maybe an alternative route to take it. But I think the biggest thing is the asking price, because I almost am inclined to just be like, if you really like one of these guys at the top of the draft, Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, and you feel like he's going to at least be on par with what Trevor Lawrence is at this point, like maybe a top 10 quarterback, it might just behoove you to just like go through with, hey, we feel good about this guy. We think we have a top 10 quarterback. Let's start fresh with somebody young and new.
Yeah, I do think if you traded for like in theory the second pick
threw for 2,000 yards this year.
Yeah.
He was hurt though. He missed 7 games.
But he's only had 1 good season in 4 years.
Yeah.
I think that's terrible.
Now, I'll say this. To me, in theory, let's say the Jaguars are open to trading him. The second pick in the draft, to me, is enough. I mean, are you trading just the second pick? And I guess the question is, do you believe Trevor Lawrence is a franchise quarterback? However your definition of that is.
No,
I see it.
I don't.
I see it.
He could be. I think he could be. I'm not sure.
The talent's there.
Yeah, I would say that I would bet more on him becoming a franchise quarterback over any of the unknowns in this draft.
Well, if that's the case, then I would trade the second pick for him. If you believe.
I would certainly be open to it.
Yeah. Tyvis?
The second pick for him?
Yeah.
It's better than any quarterback you get in this draft.
Right, but that doesn't mean you should definitely do it. It's not just is he better, it's
do I believe that this guy is going to be the guy that can take us to the promised land?
do you think you can win a Super Bowl with Trevor Lawrence?
Nope.
Okay, then I'm not making that trade. Then I wouldn't do it. Spencer?
Yeah, so what's interesting with Trevor is like the year he was at his best.
Yeah.
They ran a lot more like intermediate stuff. He did really well with like RPO style stuff. And then they got away from that this past year for whatever reason. They were throwing the ball a lot more downfield.
Guess what we don't do.
But I was going to say, like, I feel like in Kevin Stefanski's system, where there's a little bit more structure. I mean, we saw what he was able to do with Baker Mayfield early on, even if he wasn't necessarily a perfect fit for everything he wants to do with his offense. I think Trevor would actually be able to have success in this offense. Now, I guess to your point, like the question becomes, do you think he can win you a Super Bowl? And I guess the other part of that is like, do you think he's better than the guys in this draft class? Sitting here for me, I think he is probably better than the guys in this draft class. There's just a lot of unknowns. But again, like they're the ones evaluating it like way more in depth than any of us are. If they feel like they love Shedeur Sanders and he's at least on par with what they think Trevor Lawrence is or is going to be, then I guess you probably just go again with like the guy you're going to take it to. But I don't know. For me, it's about price though. If it's only going to cost you like this year's first round pick and maybe a couple other ancillary picks, fine. But if it's going to cost you like 2 firsts, like then I'm out.
Yeah, to me, I think there's a possibility Trevor Lawrence could be a franchise, when I say again, to me, you have to have a tier 1 or tier 2 quarterback to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
And
think
where
there's
is
only. He's not in either of those tiers.
Okay.
He's at best the tier 3
I think he's
quarterback.
probably tier 3.
And in my
What's
opinion,
it-
I'll put it this way, Tyvis. In my opinion, Baker Mayfield is near the top of tier 3. I don't even have him as a tier 2. And I think Baker Mayfield is clearly better than Trevor Lawrence. So I would not trade for Trevor Lawrence. I would not trade the second pick. Even though I acknowledge, as Dustin says, I think there's a chance he could still be that quarterback. But we've seen him for 4 years. Now, I don't know that it's been the best coaching. But then again, the last coach he had won a Super Bowl in Philadelphia, which is certainly more than Kevin Stefanski's done.
I mean, you kind of.
it's a guy, 4 years.
Yeah.
He's had, you said, one really, really good year in there.
Yeah.
Right, in those
Right.
4
The
years.
first year with Doug Peterson, I think, was his best year.
And he's had some
Yeah.
injuries. I know this much. The guy's a winner, dude. Like, you can say what you want about him. I remember him coming out of Clemson and everyone saying that he was the next great quarterback. And he came to the league, and it took a second, but then he became a really good player that everyone was talking about. And it's like, I'm not going to sell on Trevor Lawrence after 4 years. He hasn't been in the league 8 years, okay?
No.
It's 4 years, and he's had, 2 head coaches
Yeah.
in the 4 years?
Yeah.
Two.
This
This
will
is
be his
third
third in
coming up.
5
His
years.
Third.
Yeah.
I don't know, guys. I mean, if
I
you
would
could
stick
get him
with him if
I mean,
I were
you
Jacksonville.
kind of,
I would
honestly,
too.
Yeah.
If I'm Jacksonville, I'm not trading.
you kind
I
of got to
agree.
throw out year 1 because like year 1 was such a
That was
disaster.
a
Like,
disaster, yeah.
so it's kind of like 3 years where you feel like you really can evaluate his play, right?
And to Spencer's point about the RPO stuff, which is what he really does well, if they can get to back doing more of that, get back to doing more of that, I think that gives them an advantage, or would give whoever team he ends up going to an advantage, because he's very athletic.
Who is their coach now?
Liam Cohen.
Yeah,
the
dude,
Buccaneers
the
OC.
Bucks.
Oh,
are
the
that
dude
was
who had the real, the guy with the real creepy Duval, yeah.
I mean, how can I
That's
trust
it.
that guy?
I mean, he worked with Baker,
Well,
right?
Yeah. Well, what was the coach? What was the coach of the Jets?
Adam Gase.
Yeah, with the weird eyes.
Crazy eyes.
Like he was done. He was done after the crazy eyes. I think Liam Cohen's done already.
You don't
There's
believe,
no way that guy could have success
you
after
don't
that.
believe in him?
I will say,
no, he's done.
the last time we judged coaches based off of their press conferences were Nick Sirianni and Dan Campbell, and those two have been okay. So I'll give him a little bit of
Did
the
we
benefit of the
judge
doubt.
Did you judge Dan Campbell poorly on his press
I mean, I
conference?
think
said
people were
he's
kind of
gonna
like,
beat
who is this dude who's just like coming in musclehead talking about biting people's kneecaps, and now
Yeah.
it's worked out pretty well.
he
So I'll
sounded
give
like
him
a
the benefit of the doubt. Like a press conference isn't the end all be all, but yeah, he's off to a bad start. We'll put it that way.
I mean, that was beyond cringeworthy.
Yeah.
Spencer,
That was
what quarterback in this draft, or we was talking about the number 2 pick? Where are you at with it? Are you 100% Shedeur Sanders? You have Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter. Obviously, it's a bunch of mock drafts. Where are you at? If you were making the pick for the Cleveland Browns, who would you take and get that card?
So this is a great question too, because this was another thing I talked about on the podcast today. I'm kind of at a point where it's like you can only do 2 things in my mind. Like there's endless options of like guys you could take there,
Yeah.
but the only options for me are like you either take a quarterback or you trade back. Like if you're at 2, I don't care if like Abdul Carter's there. Like the drop off from like, I mean, you could technically trade with the Giants, right, and only drop 1 spot, and then Abdul Carter could still be there. But if you stay put and you just take a player, you're wasting an opportunity, in my opinion, to accumulate and fill some of those other needs that you have, essentially. And if you're not taking a quarterback at 2, you're basically saying, like, we need more than a quarterback. So it doesn't make sense just to stay put and, like, take a Travis Hunter, take an Abdul Carter. Like, is the drop-off from 2 to 6, if you go to 6 with the Raiders, that much in terms of the talent you're getting? Like, you could get a Will Campbell or somebody who's going to like help at least fill a need and could be like a foundational player for you regardless. So if they don't love it, then I get if they don't love any of these quarterbacks, I get maybe trading back. But for me, I've kind of come around to a point where I'm like, I think you got to take one. It's kind of that theory of like, just if you don't have one, you just keep taking one until you do. And I know there's a lot more risk because it's the number 2 overall pick. But the more I research these guys, the more I study the tape on them, the more I hear about like what the Browns are kind of saying about it. And Andrew Berry talked about how he does see at least 1 starter in this group. It feel like Shedeur Sanders feels like he's like a perfect fit for what Kevin Stefanski's offense wants to be. I go back, or what it wants to do. I go back to what Tommy Rees said at his press conference, where he was like, I want somebody who's a good decision maker. Shedeur has that. I get there's a little bit of questions with the arm talent. And on the flip side, you have that with Cam Ward, but I just think Cam Ward still has a little bit too much recklessness in him. And maybe that's something you can coach out of him, but there's also the only example I can think of is somebody who like changed that at the next level is Josh Allen the last couple of years has kind of toned it down a little bit. So I think that's harder to do than maybe what it seems, essentially.
Yeah, the other thing about the Trevor Lawrence angle here is if they decide to do that, that would be more in line with their thought process of we're not going to tear it down and rebuild. So I guess the question would be, is it possible that if you, again, a lot would have to happen, but if you got Lawrence, that means you're trying to win the next year.
Yeah.
And
You actually could, and so you're onto something here. Myles Garrett. Could you sell that to Myles Garrett?
I think so. I actually put out there like a theory that now I do think he's being serious. Like I think he wants to win more than anything.
But he could win. I guarantee you, he would rather win in Cleveland,
for
the place
sure.
he's been for 8 years.
Well, and to this theory I was throwing out there, like what if Myles' trade request is more so about like it's about like making it clear I want to win, but like if he's putting the Browns' feet to the fire a little bit more, like we don't know what the plan they presented him with was. What if they just said, like, yeah, we're really going to look hard at, like, veterans, and we'll see what the draft class has in store? Because they didn't even know when they had those conversations with him, like, how they were going to feel maybe about a Shedeur Sanders or a Cam Ward. But what if, like, all this was just to force the Browns to, like, go all out on, like, finding that quarterback? Because that's the other thing he was on Radio Row talking about, I want to play with a great quarterback.
Yeah.
He talked about playing with Jaden Daniels. A year ago this time, like I think we all probably thought Jaden Daniels had a chance to be good, but did we all think Jaden Daniels was going to take the Commanders to the NFC Championship game? Probably not. So like who's to say that like he's not just trying to force them down the route of take a quarterback at 2, and if you get me that Jaden Daniels, and then maybe we can talk again. So I'm kind of wondering if he's like forcing their hand a little bit more to find that quarterback, and if it ends up being Trevor Lawrence, I think 100% you could sell him on that.
Maybe. Because at least he's a starting quarterback in the NFL.
Who's been in the playoffs?
But we need to all live in the reality of the situation. Okay? Trevor Lawrence is not winning 3 games in the playoffs.
In the AFC?
There's no chance that's happening. We all know this.
He got to be
so let's stop it.
Lamar, Burrow,
How can you say
Jackson.
that so definitively?
I say everything.
Josh Allen.
You know that.
I know
Mahomes.
you.
Okay, fine. Yeah, what do you think the percentage chance are of Trevor Lawrence leading the Browns to the Super Bowl next year?
Next year?
Yeah.
I think it would be close to 0 with any quarterback.
That's what I'm saying. Ultimately,
So why are we playing the season then?
No.
Unless you get Mahomes,
you gotta
right?
play the season. Ultimately,
Yeah, that was
the Browns' only chance in the long term is to get a quarterback that is at least close to what Mahomes, Jackson, Burrow, and Allen are. Close. I'm not even saying they have to be that good. They got to be close. That's why they traded for Deshaun Watson, because in Houston, he was talked about in that Tier 1 group. Trevor Lawrence isn't. Now, maybe you think he can be. If you think he can be close to those guys, then yes. If Andrew Berry is convinced that with the right coaching, with Kevin Stefanski, that Trevor Lawrence can be right there just behind those guys, then okay. But so far what we've seen from Trevor Lawrence, he's not anywhere close to any of those guys. And I'm ignoring Justin Herbert, who's also way better. This is not the NFC. Jaden Daniels don't grow on trees.
Blew the league in the playoffs.
What's that?
Herbert, the one that blew the league?
Yes.
Was it to Jacksonville?
Against Jacksonville, yeah.
Okay.
I'm curious, Bull, where do you put Jalen Hurts in like the tiers?
Tier 2.
Tier 2?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you think Trevor Lawrence can get into Tier 2, then I think that you could talk yourself into it, because that's the key thing. Like Jalen Hurts was a guy who coming out like he was a 2nd-round pick.
Right.
People were kind of iffy on him, and they've been iffy on him even still. Like even going to the Super Bowl last week, people were like, "Is this guy really legit?" And then he played really well for the second time he was in the Super Bowl, and it was like, okay, like now we got to give him some respect. And he obviously talked a lot about that.
Right.
I think that's what's interesting is like, and I understand like the Eagles have a juggernaut team, so that takes a lot more from like Andrew Berry constructing the team. There's a whole other angle there of like, do you trust him to do that? But if you think Trevor Lawrence can at least get into Tier 2, I think you can talk yourself into Trevor Lawrence.
If like I said, if Andrew Berry thinks Trevor Lawrence, instead of saying Tier 2, you want to say top 10, because Tier 2 probably ends somewhere around
5 and 5 sort of splits.
Right, yes. Yeah. If you think he could be that good, then I would absolutely trade the 2nd pick for him. If I were the GM, based on the knowledge I have, and he's got way more knowledge than I do, because he's got access to information that I don't, and he's got scouts that I don't, but what I've seen from Trevor Lawrence doesn't make me think he's ever going to be that good. He'll be fine. He'll be a starter in the league, and he'll go to the playoffs occasionally. That's just how I see it. Doesn't mean I'm going to end up being right, but we all got to make our opinions. If I was the decision maker, my opinion would be he's ultimately not good enough. The thing with Jalen Hurts is, personally, I think he's been underrated a lot and overly criticized. However, he has two things going huge in his favor. Number one, obviously, the Eagles are as good, if not better, at drafting than any team in football, and they put incredible talent around him, which is almost impossible to do, how good they've been. Number two, which this is for every team in the NFC, they're in the NFC. All the best quarterbacks are in the AFC.
Yeah.
So the Browns have to overcome something that the Eagles and the Niners don't. And Washington, as good as Jaden Daniels was, if you would put Jaden Daniels, who was an equivalent team to Washington last year, the Titans, is that an equivalent? I mean, give me your equivalent.
Yeah, probably. I think that's probably fair.
Like, if he were on the Titans, would the Titans have gone to the playoffs? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I don't know that he would have.
Yeah, in the AFC, probably not. I would probably say
maybe because that division is not great.
True.
And Houston wasn't fantastic this year. But in the NFC, you don't have to deal with this gauntlet of ridiculous quarterbacks. In the same vein, like everybody's made this, Joe Burrow didn't even get to the playoffs. He's great. Okay, it was a unique circumstance, right? If the Bengals were in the NFC, does anybody think they wouldn't have made the playoffs this year?
No, I wouldn't have made it for sure.
Of course.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. So that's what makes it tricky for the Browns. They're in a very good division, in the best conference, with all the best quarterbacks. And that's what puts the Browns in a really tricky spot. Because it's almost like, and maybe they don't think about it this way. In my mind, it's like, I got to get a great quarterback, or what's the point of just getting a guy who's a little better than what I have? And maybe that's the wrong attitude that I have. But ultimately, if I'm going to use that second pick on a quarterback, whether it's to draft somebody or to use it for Trevor Lawrence, I better be pretty confident that guy can make a run and beat these good quarterbacks in the playoffs.
Well, that's why I think
Remember not the run,
Yeah.
but the comeback against Herbert that Lawrence led in the playoffs?
Yes.
Okay.
It was good.
You remember that?
I do.
Okay, so that's in there, right?
That's the only win he's ever had in the
He threw
playoffs.
3 picks in the first half and then threw
Yeah.
like 4
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
touchdowns.
And battled back.
Taylor 2 has.
Go ahead, Spencer.
Same.
No, I was going to say, I think that's what makes trading it for somebody like Lawrence tougher, because you at least have a sample size of him in the NFL where you can look and say, like, okay, we it's the same sort of thing we do with Baker all those years, right? Like, we got to year 5 with Baker, and it was like, we're still asking ourselves, is this guy a franchise quarterback? Should you invest in that?
Yeah.
So I that's why, for me, like, if you're talking about what are you trying to use the number 2 pick for, draft a guy or trade for Trevor Lawrence, that's again why I think I lean like you're better off drafting a guy, because if there's this untapped potential of like there's something there that we don't know yet, like he hasn't played at the NFL level, we think we can get him to that top 10
The
area.
unknown is always more exciting.
Yeah, like that's always more exciting. There's always more hope with that than there is with like a guy like Trevor Lawrence. Even though I like Trevor Lawrence, but I will say this. As we talk through like these veteran options, and I know like none of them are really good, right?
No.
Like you bring up Kirk Cousins. The only reason I like Kirk Cousins is because you're going to get him on like the vet minimum, and it's like for 1.2 million, why not give it a shot with Kevin Stefanski's offense, right? But I get they're all bad. If you're telling me like what veteran options are out there, if you're trying for like a quick fix, I do think Trevor Lawrence is probably the best one out there if he's actually available via trade.
And I would say this last thing, and go ahead, Tyvus. In the end, for all the negative things I've said about Trevor Lawrence, if the Browns traded the second pick in the draft for Trevor Lawrence, I wouldn't kill him for it, because I'd say, okay, they must think he can be special.
Yeah, they're trying.
And I could buy that it's possible that he could be special. So I would not kill him for it, even after all I said. Go ahead, Tyvus.
My last thing before you leave, give me a player that you hope the Browns draft in this draft. Don't have to be in the first round.
Anywhere?
At some
Oh, this
point
is
in
easy. You're going to like this one too.
Who?
Quinshawn Judkins.
Oh, that's a good one. Go Bucks.
He reminds me so much of Kareem, like the way he runs the football. I mean, I know you watched the entire playoff run. Running guys over, the stiff arms. He seeks out and that's all the stuff. That is all the stuff we said about Kareem, right? Was like he wants to block, he wants to like get in front of guys, he wants to run guys over, and I feel like the Browns could use like a sort of a different sort of style, and I know Nick Chubb can sort of be like that. I'm assuming at this point Nick Chubb's coming back. He said the comments over the weekend about how he wants to come back. And then when he wants to get something worked out quickly. But again, there's a lot of unknown with him too, just like what level he can play to. But like a running back room that features a rookie like Quinshawn as maybe the top guy, Nick Chubb and whatever he still kind of has left in the tank, and then Jerome Ford, who probably I don't imagine they're going to re-sign Jerome Ford. That's a room I can get behind. So Quinshon's my answer. I've been telling that to everybody. That's my like draft crush right now. I love that.
I'm more of a Travion guy because of the home run.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like the home
that's
run
fair.
hitting ability. Like it's.
I wouldn't be.
If it's blocked up right.
I wouldn't be
higher
opposed
pick,
to
though.
either. I wouldn't be opposed to
They
either.
both will go about the same.
so?
I think the combine numbers really dictate more so where they're gonna be.
All right. Spencer, good stuff. The podcast every day, every weekday, right?
Every weekday. Yep, Monday through
All right,
Friday.
check it out. The Locked On Browns podcast. Spencer, thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
Bro, good to see you, man.